An overall assessment of 3 mortality disease risks Part 2, number 1653, VPT 124, May 22, 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, Category, Mortality Risk. Analysis results. The VMT energy contribution percentages for the 4 major input variables were as follows. Stroke case weight equals 25%, glucose equals 24%, pulse pressure equals 23%, SBP equals 27%, CVD case weight equals 25%, glucose equals 24%, pulse pressure equals 25%, SBP equals 26%. CKD case weight equals 25%, glucose equals 23%, pulse pressure equals 25%, SBP equals 27%. These results demonstrate a remarkably balanced energy distribution among the 4 input variables across all 3 diseases. In other words, body weight, glucose, pulse pressure, and systolic blood pressure all contributed nearly equally to the accumulated viscoplastic energy associated with THRS3 disease progression. The primary reason is that the trajectories of these diseases are highly similar over time, especially for CVD and CKD. Similar disease trajectories produce similar strain rate behavior. When these similar strain rates interact with identical inputs, they naturally generate highly similar stress patterns. As a result, CVD and CKD display nearly identical stress-strain relationships. Stroke shows somewhat different stress-strain curve shapes, but its energy contribution ratio pattern remains comparable from a pathophysiological perspective. Body weight and glucose both demonstrated strong downward trends over time, while pulse pressure and systolic blood pressure remained relatively stable. This combination created similar long-term progression patterns for CVD and CKD. However, stroke behaved differently because vascular structural damage accumulated silently over many years before eventually reaching a critical threshold. Another interesting observation involves the major pivot years for each disease: stroke 2020-2021, CVD 2022-2023, and 2005-2006, KD 2004-2005. Although these pivot years differ, the overall risk patterns tell a clearer story. Both CVD and CKD risk remained below approximately 57% throughout the entire study period from 2018 to 2026. Stroke risk, however, behaved differently. It gradually increased between 2022 and 2024 before culminating in the actual hemorrhagic stroke event in 2025, following the stroke on June 21, 2025. The calculated stroke risk level subsequently declined. This pattern suggests that the stroke event functioned as the final release point of a long accumulated process rather than a sudden disease that appeared without warning. Explanation of graphic diagrams. 1. Stroke behaved differently from CVD and CKD. The TSI stroke curve fluctuated significantly, reflecting the dynamic interaction among glucose, pulse pressure pp, and systolic blood pressure SBP. Whereas CVD and CKD followed smoother downward trajectories. 2. CVD and CKD were highly similar. Their trajectories almost overlap throughout 2018 to 2026 or equals 0.942 or 94.2%, suggesting common metabolic and vascular driving mechanisms. This high correlation of 94.2% between my CVD and CKD trajectories rents a well-known clinical truth: cardiorenal syndromes are deeply intertwined. Because both CVD and CKD models rely on a larger pool of weighted, linear variables, they reflect the steady, long-term wear and tear of metabolic health rather than acute, explosive events such as stroke. 3. Body weight and glucose improved substantially. The major improvements occurred between 2019 and 2022, supporting the dominant role of long-term lifestyle management in reducing both CVD and CKD risks. 4. Pulse pressure pp became the hidden risk factor. Although weight, glucose, and SBP improved or remained stable, pp increased from 40.1 to 49.5 mmHg, indicating progressive vascular aging and reduced arterial elasticity. Unlike the other risk factors, pp reflects long-term structural changes in the arterial walls, likely representing cumulative effects of vascular calcification and aging associated with earlier years of uncontrolled diabetes. 5. The 4 factors contributed VMT energy nearly equally. The almost equal VMT energy contributions of body weight BW, glucose, pulse pressure pp, and systolic blood pressure SBP suggest that no single factor dominated disease progression. Instead, the combined interaction of metabolic improvement and vascular aging determined the overall disease trajectory. In summary, The graphics reveal a divergence between metabolic improvement and vascular aging. The engine became healthier weight and glucose, while the pipes became older pulse pressure. This may explain why CVD and CKD risks improved while stroke risk remained more dynamic and eventually manifested as an acute event. By the way, on the airplane without internet access, I could not transfer my iPhone data into my PC. Therefore, I could not use Excel to draw fancy, colorful strain stress diagrams, except for my simple black and white PC diagrams using my iPhone. Conclusion: using the assessment of my Honolulu physician in early 2026, both my cardiovascular system and kidney function currently appear healthy and stable. Importantly, this improvement was not achieved through medications. Instead, it resulted from 16.5 years of my persistent lifestyle management efforts, involving body weight control, glucose control, dietary modifications, exercise, sleep, and long-term self-monitoring. My stroke represents a very different situation. In my view, it was the payment of a long overdue debt accumulated during decades of poorly controlled diabetes, ultimately triggered by an acute systolic blood pressure surge. This experience motivated me to develop the TSI stroke warning proxy and to implement an extremely close monitoring system involving 20 to 24 blood pressure measurements per day. For me, stroke prevention requires understanding both long-term accumulated damage and short-term triggering events. Epilogue: several years ago, I performed a what-if analysis. I asked myself a simple question: what would have happened if I had continued my unhealthy lifestyle and maintained those extremely elevated metabolic biomarkers? My conclusion after conducting a sophisticated quantitative analysis at that time was that I might not have survived beyond approximately 2013 to 2017. Corresponding to ages 66 to 70. However, I am now 79.5 years old and still actively conducting research, writing papers, and learning every day. This was not fortune-telling. It was a science-based projection derived from observed biomarker trajectories and disease progression patterns. Fortunately, around 2010, I woke up and fundamentally changed my lifestyle from the ground up. Some medical professionals may disagree with my interpretation. That is perfectly acceptable. Ultimately, this is my life, and I am responsible for the consequences of my own decisions. Through science, willpower, discipline, and persistent effort, I believe I have extended my life. I have no interest in debating this conclusion with anyone. I collected more than 4 million data points from my own body and applied 44 years of college-level study across 12 academic disciplines in an effort to save my own life. That is my bottom line. Even without formal medical training, I devoted approximately 84,000 hours to studying pathophysiology, biomedicine, psychology, mathematics, physics, engineering, and artificial intelligence. These efforts helped me better understand my health conditions, my body, and my mind, and enabled me to make more informed decisions regarding my lifestyle. Clinical medicine often views data points on a screen, but I view those data points as boundaries between my life and death. As I continue aging, I keep my fingers crossed and pray for God's mercy. I hope to live close to age 90. I have never regretted dedicating the last 16.5 years of my life to medicine and health research. If my journey can inspire other patients to take greater responsibility for their own health, then all of those years of effort will have been worthwhile. One additional observation occurred to me while writing this article. During this 12 to 13-hour flight from Honolulu to New York City, I had no internet connection available. Therefore, I could not use any AI system for information searches, fact-checking, validation, literature review, or writing assistance. This paper was written entirely from memory and learned knowledge, using only my own natural intelligence, my iPhone, my finger, and the data already stored within my medical AI software system. As I continued writing, I gradually realized something important. The knowledge accumulated during the past 16.5 years was no longer merely stored in research papers, spreadsheets, remote databases, computer programs, or cloud servers. After 82,000 hours of study and research, more than 4 million collected data points, and over 1,650 written articles, much of that knowledge had become internalized within my own brain. Without internet access, reference materials, journals, search engines, or AI assistance, I was still able to reconstruct the major events of my health journey, recall key disease mechanisms, remember important biomarker trends, and perform a comparative analysis of CVD, CKD. and stroke risks. This realization gave me a deep sense of satisfaction. It suggested that years of learning, observation, calculation, and writing had gradually transformed external information into personal understanding. For me, this article is not merely an assessment of 3 mortality disease risks. It also serves as a small demonstration of long-term learning itself. The airplane environment accidentally became a natural experiment, with no external resources available. The only tool I could rely upon was my own accumulated knowledge. The fact that I could still produce a coherent quantitative paper suggests that the research framework I developed over the years is no longer stored only in computer systems or databases. It has become part of the way I think, observe, analyze, and understand the world around me. My brain is the source of my ultimate power. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No. Doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to T. The author, Gerald C. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.